It's the pill they assured us was safer than Tylenol. So why are so many women dying from mail-order chemical abortions? I'm Hayden Ludwig. Pro-lifers cheered when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, signaling an end to almost 50 years of legal abortions nationwide that claimed the lives of 63 million babies. Little did we know that professional pro-choicers would evolve that battle to end abortion into a completely new fight involving at-home abortions and risky pills, with dire consequences for countless women. Here to expose the truth about the dangers of mifepristone is Samantha Flom, Senior Investigative Researcher for Restoration News. Sam, thanks for joining Restoration Spotlight.
Thanks for having me. I so appreciate the opportunity to talk about this topic.
So I can't imagine anything more barbaric for an industry supposedly concerned about women's health than telling women to abort their babies by themselves in their bathrooms and then maybe have some ice cream and cry about it. And yet, Sam, that's where this abortion industry has ended up, hasn't it?
Yes, it has, unfortunately. And what's worse, we're now hearing stories of women who are ordering these pills online, taking them at home without the supervision of a doctor, and within days, they're dead. And the fact that this is happening and the abortion industry is still defending these drugs as, quote, safer than Tylenol, I mean, to me, I think that exposes the industry's true priorities. For decades, they've lied to women that these pills are safe, and we now have real evidence showing to the contrary. And yet, instead of rushing to protect these women from these dangerous pills, instead, they're basically saying, pay no attention to the dead women behind the curtain. It's crazy.
Now, by evidence, you're, of course, alluding to a recent report by a sister organization of ours, the Foundation for the Restoration of America, which dug into mifepristone, now that's the abortion drug, linking it to more than 4,000 serious adverse events, which can include things like sepsis, uterine rupture, or even death. Now, the stats are very stark. About 1 in 10 women who take the pill will experience one of these or other serious adverse events. That's about 22 times higher than what the FDA officially puts forward. Sam, help us understand this discrepancy here and what this report reveals.
Yeah, so FFROA's clinical team reviewed 7 years of national insurance claims data for patients who took mifepristone for pregnancy termination. And they reviewed, I believe it was 865,000 cases and found that roughly 11% of women experienced at least one serious side effect from this drug.
11%?
Yes. And when we talk about serious events, by the way, we're not talking about the typical cramping, nausea, light bleeding. We're talking about potentially life-threatening complications like those you mentioned, hospitalizations, incomplete abortions, which can be fatal if they're left untreated. And while the FDA label does warn about some of these complications, they basically present them as if they're very rare. Now, we have real-world data that shows that's not true.
Now, I just want to be really clear. This isn't serious adverse events for when you're in the hospital or at an abortion clinic getting an abortion. This is something that could occur in your home.
Correct.
Right? With a mail-in drug.
Right.
How long has that been legal?
So it's actually been happening now since 2021. Basically, when the Biden FDA took over, they decided that, this is essential care. This was, of course, during the pandemic, and they wanted to make sure women could get their hands on these pills without having to go to a doctor's office. The problem with that, of course, is the fact that you need to be able to get an ultrasound in order to confirm, first of all, that you are pregnant, how far along your pregnancy is, and to also make sure that it's not an ectopic pregnancy. If it's an ectopic pregnancy, these drugs will not work to abort your baby, first of all. And if you believe that it's worked and you keep just going on with your life as if nothing's wrong, you could very well end up in the hospital because a ruptured ectopic pregnancy can be fatal.
And do we know how the FDA verifies whether it's an ectopic pregnancy before the pharmacist issues these drugs?
They don't. They don't have to now because women can, essentially what they've done is made it possible for women to speak with a doctor via telehealth. They don't need to get an ultrasound. They can just speak with them online, say, hey, I think I'm pregnant. I took a pregnancy test. It was positive. Can you prescribe me these drugs? And I mean, what's the doctor going to be able to do? They can't force them to come in for an ultrasound. So they'll say, sure, you're probably pregnant. Here, have these pills and we'll find out.
But of course, they should be forcing them to come in.
Correct.
By FDA, of course, we mean the Food and Drug Administration, the agency responsible for approving every pharmaceutical that gets marketed in the United States. You've been digging into subsequent reporting after this FFROA report on the abortion drug came out earlier this year. One of the things that you found that's so stunning is the FDA's own numbers don't add up. If memory serves, they report about 36 serious deaths, right? 36 deaths linked to the abortion pill mifepristone, and yet their own data, maybe buried a little deeper, shows more like 150 deaths. Why this discrepancy?
So one thing that many people probably don't know about mifepristone is that it's actually approved by the FDA for another use. It's not only approved for abortions, but it's actually also used since 2012 to treat symptoms of Cushing's syndrome, which is a hormonal disorder.
Really?
Yes. So what I found in digging into the database was that many of the adverse events in there are actually related to Korlym. And obviously, this drug is used for different purpose.
Used by men, too, I imagine.
Yes, men and women. It's used in different dosages, and it's for a serious condition. We're not talking about an elective procedure like an abortion. So I'm by no means trying to bring the hammer down on Korlym.
Right.
But what I've noticed is that many of the patients who took Korlym and reported serious adverse events, they were actually the exact same adverse reactions that women were experiencing when taking the drug for abortion. So to me, that suggests that the issue here in relation with Korlym is not necessarily their pre-existing conditions. It's not, the fact that they were taking other drugs or anything like that. The real problem here is the mifepristone, from what I can tell.
This is the kind of thing that if you're a woman considering taking the abortion pill, I think you'd want to know if you had a 1 in 10 chance of possibly dying, among other serious consequences. And yet the number one marketer of this, which I believe is Planned Parenthood, there's no marketing involved in this, right? There's no explaining all of this. Again, they say it's safer than Tylenol. How can that even be legal, let alone ethical?
Well, I mean, there's nobody stopping them, at least right now. And that's, it's unfortunate because we have this new administration in place and we're very hopeful that they will actually take a look at this drug. Thankfully, Secretary Kennedy has already promised to do so and that they will conduct a review. But as of yet, they haven't actually moved the needle to change any of what's currently going on.
Let's talk about the explosion in the use of the at-home abortion pill. Advocates on the left, such as Planned Parenthood or the National Abortion Federation, they call this telehealth. You do a Zoom call with your doctor, and then they send you the pills you need in the mail here, and they say it's, again, safer than Tylenol, and it's the normal process. That exploded in the wake of COVID for very understandable reasons under the Biden administration. But a big turning point, as you've pointed out in your work, is the Dobbs decision in 2022, which of course ended the Roe v. Wade reign of tyranny with nationwide abortion everywhere. And it seems to me one of the obvious problems is even if states lock down their abortion laws in Texas or Oklahoma or Florida, you can still mail these pills to women in those states.
It's really unfortunate. In fact, it shouldn't be legal because we actually do have a law on the books, the Comstock Act, that is supposed to prohibit the mailing of abortion-related materials.
How long does that law go back?
I believe it's from the 1800s. I don't know the exact year off the top of my head. Yeah, but it's very old. And so, of course, you have the people on the left who say, oh, well, that's, an ancient law. We don't need to enforce that anymore. And under the Biden administration, they basically said, we're not going to enforce that. We're just going to pretend that's not a thing. But unfortunately, it is for them. And yet it's not being enforced, and it should be. It's a law on our books. It's federal law, and we should be following this. So again, the question remains as to why nothing has been done to stop these pills from being mailed across state lines. It doesn't make any sense.
So the Biden administration greenlights mifepristone for mailing to patients' homes back in 2021. I understand they codified that decision in 2023 through the FDA, correct? But mifepristone itself goes all the way back in this country to the 1990s. You've done a lot of work exposing how the Clinton administration, starting in 1993, brought mifepristone into America. Give us the high-level summary of that process and maybe some of the important milestones along the way.
So the Clinton administration basically forced this pill upon the U.S. It wasn't really going to be marketed in the U.S. The French manufacturer of the drug did not want to sell the drug in the
Is that
United
right?
States. They had actually been dissuaded. At first in France, they didn't even want to sell it in France, to be honest, at first. It was developed in 1980. By 1988, it was approved for use in France. And within weeks of that approval, the drug was actually, they decided to pull it from the market in France.
For safety reasons?
Mainly because they saw such a backlash from the public. And this isn't France, a very pro-abortion country. But they saw public outcry and they said, you know what, we're going to pull the drug. And then days later, they were actually forced to put the drug back on the market by the French health minister because the company was actually partially owned by the French government. So they were forced to first of all put it on the market in France, and now fast forward several years in the U.S., they're basically being forced by the U.S. government to put it on the market here, even though they did not want to. They actually they had a parent corporation, Hecht, in Germany, who the CEO at the time was actually, according to the FDA director's own words, very staunchly Catholic. So again, there's another reason why they don't really want to market this drug. But unfortunately, they were kind of backed into a corner by the Clinton administration.
So if I can get this right, the Clinton administration basically approaches the mifepristone manufacturer in France, which presumably has a patent on this pharmaceutical,
Correct.
And forces them to market it in a foreign country that they don't want to market it to.
Yes. So what they did, because they refused to market it themselves, they said, okay, we will enter into negotiations with you, or rather with the Population Council, which was basically the administration's chosen vessel, to make it appear more or less improper. Yeah. So basically, the administration spearheaded these negotiations, helped to facilitate these negotiations to get the French company to gift the patent rights to mifepristone to the Population Council, which, by the way, I don't know if many people know, the Population Council was actually founded for the purpose of eugenics, promoting eugenics and population control.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a moment. I mean, it has population in the name, right? And they don't want more of them, a bigger population here. So the Population Council is it's an NGO. It's an advocacy group, right? It's been around for how long?
It was founded in 1952 by John D. Rockefeller III, who was a major fan of the eugenics movement. And
tell us about eugenics, just for the people who don't know.
So eugenics is basically this idea that where people like Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood, John D. Rockefeller, they decided that the world population was just growing too fast and they needed to find some way to shrink it. Why? Mainly because they wanted to make life easier for elitists like themselves. They wanted to exert their control in new ways over the population. They decided that one way to do that was basically to get rid of these undesirable groups in their mind, groups that they had deemed unfit for reproduction, which unfortunately included the usual suspects, Black Americans, the poor, the disabled, basically
Southern Europeans.
Yes, basically they took the concept of natural selection to a new level and said, you know what, improving public health conditions is no longer having the same effect where people who would normally die off because they are feeble, sickly, unfit, they're now surviving and now they're reproducing, and it's muddying our population to a degree that we can't tolerate. So we're going to forward these policies of birth control. We're going to start promoting abortion. And that was their way of basically weeding out, again, these undesirable populations.
Ideas that would not be out of place in the Third Reich, right?
Correct.
Okay, so and to be clear, eugenics had its heyday in the wake of the Second World War, right? Fast forward to the 1990s, and what you're saying is it wasn't a women's health organization that received the patent to distribute mifepristone in the United States. It was an organization rooted in population control.
Correct. I mean, they've obviously tried since then to position themselves as, a women's health organization. But
haven't changed the name.
Yes, exactly.
Still Population
It's
Council.
Still the Population Council. Same thing with Planned Parenthood. I mean, they're still who they are at their core. They've just found a new way of disguising that they're not so out and proud about it anymore because they realize, maybe that's not a good look after all.
So from the Clinton administration up to Joe Biden in 2021, what was the availability of mifepristone on the market? Certainly before 2021, it couldn't be mailed to your house. Could you go to a pharmacist and get it?
So originally, the plan was that, well, the restrictions, originally the FDA approved it in 2000 with certain restrictions in place to promote, to ensure that women were still safe when they took this drug. And so one of those restrictions say they had, reporting requirements to make sure that adverse events were reported back to the FDA. They required patients to obtain the medication in person from their doctor. And gradually over time, they just kind of started stripping those down and, loosening things. In 2016, under the Obama administration, they removed those reporting requirements. So now officially, the only entity that has to report any adverse events associated with mifepristone is the drug maker itself. And unfortunately, they can't report what they don't receive. So there's no requirement necessarily to report to the drug maker, say, a case of sepsis or hemorrhage. The only requirement associated with this drug is death right now. So basically, unless this woman has died, they don't want to know what happened to her after taking these drugs. It's sickening.
Now, pro-abortion lobbyists and advocacy groups, they say that abortion is medically necessary to save women's lives. We're not talking about at-home abortions here. We're just talking about abortion as a concept in general. You disagree?
Absolutely disagree. I mean, frankly, it's not just misleading, it's a lie. This is not a medically necessary treatment. We're not treating a disease here. We're talking about pregnancy, and abortion essentially is an elective procedure to kill a living human being. That's all it is.
Right.
And so to claim that that's somehow essential health care, there's nothing caring about killing an unborn baby. I'm sorry, but there isn't. And to say that this is medically necessary, I mean, that takes it to a whole other level, because the reality is there is no situation in which a woman experiencing life-threatening complications from her pregnancy must have an abortion to treat that condition. There are always alternatives. And what bothers me the most about this is that, they'll say, oh, well, what about, an ectopic pregnancy, for instance. That's a case where obviously the baby's not viable. You can't, you don't have a chance of saving both the mother and the baby. And they'll equate that to an abortion. But the reality is, the intent of removing that pregnancy is not to kill the baby. That's not the intention. And the abortion, in my mind, the definition of abortion is all about intention. What is your intention in performing this procedure? Are you going in with the idea, okay, we're going to kill this baby and that's just going to solve our problem? Yeah. Or are you saying, okay, we're going to save this mom because her life is in danger? And so when you remove an ectopic pregnancy, regardless, unfortunately, the baby is not going to survive. But the mother has a chance of survival, and the point is to save the mother.
I know women who've had ectopic pregnancies. None of them, all of them would be horrified to hear that equated to electing to murder their child. Mm-hmm. I can't think of anything more sinister. Well, actually, I can't. DIY abortions in your house might take the cake as the most sinister thing here.
And it's the same thing with miscarriage care. They'll claim that miscarriage care is the same thing as an abortion. It's not. I mean, I will say that some doctors do prescribe mifepristone off-label specifically to treat miscarriages. If the woman's, if she hasn't expelled all of the tissue yet, they might use it for that purpose. But to claim that that's an abortion, first of all, the baby is already dead. It's not alive. You're not killing the baby. And second of all, again, intention. Your intention is not to kill a baby that may very well have been very wanted by the mother. You're just trying to save the mother because at this point, her health is at risk.
Let's talk about big abortion, the lobby itself. We've calculated at Restoration News that in 2023, big abortion brought in the neighborhood of $4 billion, billion with a B. That's a lot of money. But a surprising amount of that seems to come from the federal government. Now, you and I both know that it's been illegal for decades for the federal government to fund abortion, both domestic and abroad. That's the Helms and Hyde amendments. You're not allowed to use taxpayer dollars to snuff out the lives of Americans or anybody else. Yeah. And yet one of the features of President Trump's big, beautiful budget reconciliation bill, which, of course, as of recording, still has not been passed yet, though we expect it will, we pray it will, is to defund Planned Parenthood. Sam, help us understand, how can we defund an organization that should never have been funded in the first place if we were following federal law?
Right. So obviously, as you mentioned, the Hyde Amendment bars federal funds from funding abortions directly. The problem, however, is that Planned Parenthood, and so I'm sure some other abortion providers as well, offer other services that are technically coverable under Medicaid. For instance, they offer STD testing, pregnancy testing, cancer screenings, things like that. And so those services are technically covered under Medicaid, and they are able to be reimbursed for them. Planned Parenthood actually in their latest annual report said that they received, I believe it was 39% of their total revenue in the latest reportable year from government funding. So that includes things like contracts, for instance, Title X funding for family planning. And these are, unfortunately, the fact is that money is fungible. So regardless of whether these dollars are directly funding abortion, they're still subsidizing it because they're keeping the lights on at Planned Parenthood, which is the nation's largest abortion provider.
Well, I can't imagine anybody on the left not objecting to federal subsidies of the National Rifle Association. Oh, but it's okay, it's only for gun safety training. Really? I mean, you think they'd go along with that reasoning?
Of course not.
Of course not. Samantha Flom, thank you for all you do and your time today on Restoration Spotlight.
Thank you. So great to be here.
I'm Hayden Ludwig, and this is Restoration Spotlight, a project of Restoration News, your source of headline-smashing investigative journalism for the America First movement. Check us out at restoration-news.com. Until next time, stay vigilant and trust in God.